Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Michelle Neptune, Program Committee Chair and Board Member for GPLH, as Deborah mentioned. Welcome to the GPLH webinar, DAFs Demystified, Unlocking the Philanthropic Power of the Donor Advised Funds. I am thrilled to welcome you and our speaker this afternoon. Just wanted to mention we do have some upcoming programs because I'm the Program Committee Chair. Programs are free for our members, so join us. Our next connections call for members only is scheduled for October 9th, 9:30 a.m. We are planning an in-person Meet the Funders event. It's going to be great. October 15th at the Raxon Center in White Plains from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. And on November 19th at noon, we will welcome Jeffrey Winthal and Helene Mantel to share their expertise on grant budgeting. So they're going to be doing the complexities of aligning a grant's budget to its proposed intervention. It's a little high-level budgeting there, so I'm really looking forward to that one. If you're not a member and you paid for this event, we will happily apply that fee to our very reasonable annual membership fee. And you can use coupon code SAVE30. And if Deb, you could just put that link in the chat for folks that are not members and are interested in joining us. We will also, of course, distribute an email with the recordings and slides to all registered participants. And the materials are always available also on the GPLH member only section of the website. So if you wanted to look back as a member and see all of those resources, those are there, along with other resources. I did set up a survey that I will also be sending to everyone. If you guys take 1 minute to fill out the survey, that is very helpful to us on the program committee so we know what kind of programs to offer for you. So please do that. Couple of house rules, please mute yourself unless you are asking a question. And also please refrain from using any AI scribes or note-taking softwares like Otter AI. We will be monitoring the chat for any questions throughout the program, and there should be some time for Q&A at the end, I hope. Okay, that being said, I am thrilled to introduce today's speaker, Kristin Raack. Kristin is the founder and principal of AltruNext, a firm that helps nonprofits flourish. Over nearly 25 years, she's helped a diverse portfolio of nonprofits expand their impact. Kristin guides nonprofits to success by deploying creative fundraising strategies that enhance outcomes, conducting transformational organizational planning that brings clarity, and accelerating leadership development through dynamic learning opportunities. Her commitment to supporting the nonprofit sector is exemplified by her service on various nonprofit boards and frequent trainings for local and national nonprofit audiences. Kristin has earned the distinguished Certified Fundraising Executive and Grants Professional Certification credentials. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kristin. I'm so happy to pass it on to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, all of you. I started my career as a grant professional 25 years ago, and I, in fact, this morning was working on a grant proposal for a client, and so I feel like I'm amongst my people, and I am really delighted to be here. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I would just ask for people to give a little thumbs up so I know if you are seeing it. Great. I saw some thumbs up. Thank you so much. Um, I am thrilled to talk about DAFs. I looked back at my notes and I gave my first DAF presentation more than a decade ago. And they continue to change the way that we're talking about this opportunity and are becoming increasingly relevant in this time, of course, as federal grants are uh, at risk in many ways, and the ripple effect that that creates with other state and local grants. And there's such a powerhouse for philanthropy that I am really happy to talk with you. A couple of notes about me. You may have already realized I get really excited, so I tend to sound a bit like the Gilmore Girls, if you're familiar with that cultural reference, and sometimes I talk real fast. So just wave at me, like unmute yourself and ask me to repeat something if you missed it, because I don't want my excitement to stand in the way of what you need out of today. Also, we're a small enough group that I want to be in conversation with you. I know that there's a lot of wisdom and experience in this room, and I want us to learn and grow together. So raise your hand, either your real hand or that little emoji hand. Unmute yourself. Let's have conversations. And several times I'll invite you, like, drop some things into chat so that we can all be learning together. Before we jump into the real meat of today's conversation, I just want to thank you again for being here. Your work is more important now than ever before, and I know how hard it is to set aside even an hour to participate in learning opportunities. And so I hope this day will be a gift back to you. I will be sharing what I have learned, and I hope that it equips you to have meaningful conversations with your team about how you can maximize the power of DAFs in your organization. As you saw in the meeting materials and invitation, we've got a couple of key objectives today. I'm going to start with an introduction to DAFs. Some of you may know about them well, but I want to make sure we all have the same language and we're in the same place. We're going to talk about just those nuts and bolts of who administers them, how does that work? And since we're mostly grant professionals, I want to talk about how DAFs are different than foundations. I think that's a really critical differentiation. And then, of course, the secret sauce, how do we maximize this? If our organization isn't getting much DAF funding, what do we do differently? How can we apply things that we've learned today? I invite you to drop into chat. What are some specific things you want to learn today? Did you come with any specific questions? This will help us. We'll pause a couple of times throughout for questions and we'll have Q&A at the end. So as you're hearing things or thinking about it, let us know. What do you need to know today in order to feel like this was a good use of your time? So why are DAFs important? And as you'll hear, I go back and forth between DAF and DAF. It's all the same. You're probably here because you already know they're important. But let me remind you, these are the 3 reasons that if I had to summarize why they're critical at this moment in 2025, it is that they are the fastest growing philanthropic vehicle. Look at that chart to the right. You know, the fact that we went from just around 200,000 of these in 2011 to nearly 2 million in 2022, and they're still counting, right? The newest reports, some are saying that we're over 2 million, others say not quite yet. But they are the fastest growing vehicle for philanthropy. And so we need to be conversant in them. We need to understand. And you might be here because you know they present some unique challenges or opportunities. They're different than foundations. They're different than some other just cash donations. And so we need to understand those nuances if we're going to be effective in our roles as fundraisers. And as you know, they raise a lot of questions. You know, are they just, hoarding money in DAFs? Like, how do we find these people? You know, there's just a lot of mystery and sometimes misconceptions. So let's jump into this. The definition, the official way that we should be thinking about them is that a DAF is a philanthropic vehicle established at a public charity. We'll talk about public charities in a minute. It allows donors to make a charitable contribution, receive an immediate tax benefit, and then recommend grants from the fund over time. In other words, it's a lot like a charitable savings account. It's like a separate account, where you only give to charity out of it. So if you're thinking in terms of like, I have a checking account, I have a savings account, I have some investment accounts, DAF is really very similar to those. So, and it's important to remember, it's just a vehicle. So just like appreciated assets, stock, things of that nature, or real estate gifts, or writing a check, those are all vehicles for giving. DAFs are also just a vehicle for giving. It's not actually an entity that works differently like a foundation. It's just the method in which they are giving. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. You may already be familiar with this, but I think it's really critical to understand a little bit of how it works behind the scenes. And I have talked with many DAF sponsors and have confirmed that this is the reason people are drawn to DAFs as well. So what happens now, and I'm just going to use myself as an example. I actually don't have one yet, but they're becoming increasingly accessible. And my husband and I have, in fact, talked about starting one. So a donor, such as me, contributes money or even non-cash assets to a sponsoring organization. It could be something like I would choose my community foundation because I would trust them to administer my funds. At that exact moment that I put money in there or some other non-cash asset, I get the tax deduction today. And so then what happens is those dollars are invested, and the sponsoring organization loves investing those in a way that helps you grow your ability to have a philanthropic impact. And then later, whenever I want, maybe, at year end, when I get a lot of solicitations, or maybe 2 years from now, I will say to that administrator, would you please make a grant to my favorite local food pantry and to my alma mater and to this educational entity? And so that is the essence of how they work. They're not as complex as we often think of them. It's just simply a tool for setting aside funds for philanthropic gifts at a later date. There are many benefits for the donor, and it's much more, as I said, accessible. So whereas setting up a private family foundation, there's a lot of administrative costs. There's a lot, usually a threshold of, a certain amount of money that would make it prudent. DAFs are really accessible to everyone. In fact, some of them now, it's less than $5,000 to start a DAF. And so many families even are making it an intergenerational activity, right? Maybe grandma and grandpa put in some money, mom and dad put in some money, and they even involve the grandkids in making some of these decisions. So because of the low threshold, because of the convenience, because you're not paying staff to administer it for you, because you get that immediate tax benefit. So if I don't know where I want to make a gift, but I know that at some point I want to, why not get the tax benefit now and then have the luxury of some time to research, to be in relationship with nonprofits, and then to make the best possible decision for me, for my family, when the time is right. I see so many great questions. I'm getting distracted and excited. I'm going to get to some of them in a minute, and we're going to pause in a minute to make sure we unpack these questions. But let me give you a little bit more context because I'm getting to some of the details about those administrators and sponsors as well. I think one of the things I am most keen in these conversations is to question the sometimes prevailing presumption that DAFs are bad for philanthropy, because a lot of people have it in their minds that DAFs are just where the money goes to be hidden and it's not going out into the world. And I love this quote because it talks about DAFs are really a demonstration of a donor's desire for greater impact, right? It's a very organized and thoughtful approach to philanthropy. So if I ever see in my donor database that someone has a DAF, I immediately know they are committed to making a difference in the world. And they should be one of my top prospects. No matter how much is in their DAF, it means they're actively focused on philanthropy. And so, yes, there are some shortcomings. DAFs are not perfect, and they are incredibly powerful. So if you are aware of folks with DAFs, we're going to talk later about how to incorporate that understanding into your conversations with your donors, with your stakeholders, and prospective new donors as well. I'm going to jump into this next section where we talk about more of the nuts and bolts of DAFs because it's going to hit a lot of your questions. and then we'll pause and make sure we cover the others. So at least when I started this like 10 years ago, I thought DAFs were this fancy, brand new, shiny thing, right? A new tool. But actually, they've been around since 1931. And I just find that so fascinating that it actually is a tool that has been part of our world for almost 100 years. Before I was a grant writer, I was actually a historian. I could geek out on this, but I will not. I just wanted to give you a point of reference that these tools have been around much longer than we may have assumed. In the last 20 years, though, that's when both they have grown exponentially and there's been a lot more discussion about it. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a huge impetus for the growth in DAFs because it doubled the standard deduction, which reduced the numbers of households that could itemize their deductions. So that's when DAFs became attractive for people like me, right? Who I don't give, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I give thousands, right? And so it what became an opportunity to bunch or bundle is usually the word that's used, those charitable contributions, right? I put a lot into my DAF in one year so I can get that deduction, but then I can, you know, dribble it out over many years. And so I wouldn't meet that deduction level in an average year, but if I put a big amount into my DAF, then I do. So a lot of financial advisors say this is a really good tool if you want to be engaged in philanthropy, but also want to maximize your tax benefits. Let's talk about those administrators because this is critical and they're the gatekeepers. They're the people behind all of these activities. Community foundations are my favorite because they have a stronger commitment to philanthropy, to guiding and supporting their DAF donors, and in having a impact on the community. So if I were to choose a DAF, I would definitely go to my community foundation because what I have found is that they become advocates and ambassadors for your local organizations. It is their job to find out who is doing what in the community. And if I come to them and say, I care about homelessness, they are kind of the broker. They should help connect me with local organizations doing that work. So community foundations are amazing when they are the DAF sponsor or administrator. Those words are used interchangeably because they just have a lot more skin in the game. They're a lot more committed to the impact. You're probably more familiar with national DAFs, right? Fidelity and Schwab and all these financial organizations said, wow, there's a lot of money into this. Let's get into this game. And so they're great, but you're not going to have a relationship with them like you might with the administrator at a community foundation, right? You're just going to get a letter from Fidelity that said, a DAF made a gift to you. Here it is. And then there are now a lot of single issue organizations that are launching their own DAFs. So Jewish Federation is a great example, and they're really active and they act much like a community foundation, that broker, that ambassador relationship to help get the dollars where they'll do the most good. So I think that gives you a sense of kind of the range, and you will interact differently with DAFs depending on who is administering them. So across the board, though, through all of those three types, the point here is that they've increased over 600%. As I said before, nearly 2 million accounts, nearly 252 billion are held in those accounts. And right now, they're about 10% of all charitable giving. So that's super fascinating to me. So if you think about that Giving USA, right, we know that about 70% of all gifts, if you include bequests and current cash gifts, come from individuals. Well, about 10% of those, a DAF is involved. I think that's really interesting as we see, again, it's a vehicle. Do we track how many of those gifts are stock gifts? No. Should we? Maybe. A couple of other facts that might be helpful. 49% of all DAFs have assets of less than 50,000. So again, these are more like your average donors, your mid-level donors. These are not necessarily major gift prospects, right? It's more your annual fund prospects in most cases. Only 7% have balances of $1 million or more. So let me say that again. Only 7% have more than $1 million in the DAF. Also, an interesting note, most DAF contributions are in the fourth quarter, like other philanthropy, right? We know most giving happens in November and December, but grants from DAFs are actually much more balanced throughout the year. So you should be talking to your DAF donors throughout the year. Only 32% of those gifts are in the fourth quarter. So it's, pretty high levels of giving from DAFs in the first 3 quarters of the year. And a lot of people also worry, they're like, oh, but they're all anonymous and I can't, connect the dots between the donor and the gift. That's actually a fallacy. Less than 4% of all DAF gifts are anonymous. Less than 4%. So again, don't let those, misconceptions and kind of misinformation distract you from the potential. And in terms of other misconceptions, we think, oh, is the money just sitting there? In a 3-year period, at least 78% made at least one grant. The median payout was 9%. If you look at it in terms of dollars, 22.5% of those folks gave much higher than the foundation rate of 5%. And then, that median payout, if you remove inactive accounts, is 15%, average payout 18%. And I find this so incredibly encouraging too. During 2023, when we saw overall, Giving USA said giving plummeted, small donors plummeted. It was a sad year, right? A lot of things in 2023 were a little bit bleak. During that same time, DAF giving increased dramatically. So these donors don't always follow the regular trends because they have already made that commitment to philanthropy. The money is already available. And so I think that's a really helpful, positive framing. Instead of this scarcity mindset, we have an opportunity here. And then, as you are probably more familiar with foundations, let me just do this quick comparison of, how foundations and DAFs are different. And there are always exceptions, of course, right? So foundations are required to give 5% of their annual assets. Right now, DAFs do not have that requirement, but we saw they're actually giving more, 19-ish%. Generally, DAFs don't accept requests or proposals, but I've actually seen some family foundations that used to be a private foundation moved their money into a DAF because there's less administrative work, and they kept their application process. So there are exceptions to that rule, right? Some still function much more like a private foundation, even though the money is officially held in a DAF. The one that gets all of us, right? Makes our hearts sad. Generally, you cannot research DAFs. You can research foundations. We love FDO and instrumental and all of these different tools. I'm going to talk in a minute, though. There is one portal where you can get a subscription and you can research DAFs. So we're going to get there in a minute. And then, of course, some of the things we've already talked about in terms of the reason why donors are attracted to them, is the difference in the administration process, the tax deductibility, and the cost to the donor. So that is kind of my overview. In a minute, we're going to get to the good stuff, right? How do we tap into this potential? How do we maximize these gifts? But I have seen so many questions fly by, and I'm hoping my friends, Michelle and Deborah, can help me. What questions can we answer now? Because we want to make sure everyone has some clarity before we begin to talk about how do we apply this knowledge. And others, unmute yourself if Deborah and Michelle don't call out your question. Go ahead, Deborah.
I see that Cecilia Mom is asking, do the funds have to be donated within a specific time frame? Like, for example, all donated within 5 years.
No, there's no requirements either about donating into a DAF or donating out of a DAF. So you could, in fact, one of the things we'll talk about in a minute, you should have a plan for your DAF after you pass. Just like an estate plan, you need a DAF plan. Is there a beneficiary? Who takes ownership? If it's something like Fidelity, sometimes they just administer it. But you want a plan. Hopefully, you pass it along to a family member who will administer it with your preferred causes in mind.
Okay,
Great
and
question.
Laura Sanzel is asking, do DAF managers ever have influence as to where donors donate the dollars? How is that communicated?
Yeah. So I've actually done this session once in Chicago and once in DC, where I had representatives from the Community Foundation and from JUF, both of them. Fidelity and those folks, they didn't want to talk to me. So yes, sometimes, but really their role is to be a bit agnostic in the process and to consider the donor's wishes. So their job is to help connect the donor with causes that align with their interests. But they do conduct due diligence and they will look at your 990. They will look at you as an organization. And sometimes they will say, we will not make a gift to this organization because it looks unhealthy. There's some red flag here in their tax documents. So that's the difference with a DAF. The technical language is I would recommend a grant from my DAF, and the sponsor or the administrator decides whether or not to honor that recommendation. And so if they do the work and realize you're not a good place to donate to, they will mention that. And many of them have policies that say in X, Y, and Z cases, we will not recommend or make the grant to an organization. But they should not, of course, lean into like their pet projects or their own interests. They should, say, here are 3 or 4 good organizations working in this area. Maybe you care about animals. Here are some animal related causes. They all pass the sniff test, right? They're healthy, they file their 990 properly, all the things we're seeing, they're doing good work. And then the donor should make the final choice.
Okay,
Mary, I see a hand. Why don't we jump to Mary, and then Deborah, you can look at your notes and we'll come back.
sure thing.
So yeah, our organization has received gifts from donor advised funds
Great.
through community foundations or other places that,
Sure.
like you described.
Mhm.
The thing that frustrates me a little bit is so it'll be this Smith family fund given through this other organization. It feels so removed from me, and it feels so like there's no identifying information other than the Smith family. Who the Smith family, and how do I get a hold of them to thank them even, and how do I cultivate that relationship to encourage future donations, and that's the kind of thing that frustrates me a little bit, and that I
Agreed.
am hoping to get more information about.
Yeah, I always call and follow up. That's the first thing, because as I said, less than 4% of DAF donors want their gift to be anonymous. And so a lot of times it's just an error, right? They think that you are getting more information than you are getting. And so I always just call and say, hey, we got this gift. We are so grateful. We want to make sure we're acknowledging the proper person and, connecting their gift. If they're already in our database, we want to know that. is there any other information you can give me that will help clarify which Smith family this is? Often that's as easy as it is. And they will say, oh yeah, here's their address, here's all the details, because the donor did not say they want to be anonymous. And so it's just like the template that they're sending out sometimes has more details, sometimes has less details. And a lot of times that's because they assume the donor told you. And so, the sponsor is assuming the donor is in communication with you. Oh, I'm going to make a gift through my DAF. And so they just administer, right? That's their only job, is just to send the money. And so they don't realize you don't know. So that's where I always start, is just a simple phone call. In a minute, we're going to talk about some of the other tools available that you can use to also help uncover that. But Mary, in my experience, most of the time it's that simple, which is encouraging, right? We need an easy win. And in most cases, this is an easy win. Deborah, are there other questions that we should answer at this point?
I think, well, I have a question while I'm looking, if you don't mind. My big question is, is there a way to get on the list of organizations that the Fidelities, et cetera, think ought to be given to?
Yeah. Fidelity and Schwab and all of those type of national and specifically financial firms, no. Everyone's different, right? So just like when you know one foundation, you know one foundation. Same thing when you know one administrator or sponsor of a DAF, you know one. But all of the community foundations and organizations like JUF and others who have a focused purpose of administering DAFs have said they are open to receiving like a one-pager about your organization. So I call them or I send an email. I know who they are at all the local community foundations I work with, but I say, hey, I know you play a role in administering DAFs. I would love to just send an introductory document about the work that we're doing in case anyone expresses interest in this area. Would that be appropriate? Every once in a while, someone will say, no, I don't do that. But as I said, because I've been focused on this as part of my, pet projects over the last decade, most people have said yes, it actually helps them to become aware of organizations in the community that they are not currently aware of. So a nice one pager, here's your mission, here's some of your impact, tell a story, right? You don't want it to be a lot of, work for them to read it, make it user friendly. But many of them, if you ask, will say, yes, send me some simple information. So if someone is interested, I can point them in your direction.
Great.
Sue, I see your hand.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. So I have a general DAF question, and I'm also going to try to figure out how to lower my hand. What do they do with all the money that's parked there?
They invest it. So it's growing.
It's
growing and growing and growing.
So do the participants in the DAF gain from that investment, or does the DAF take that investment and use their own agenda and make their own donations?
No. So it stays in that DAF. So if I invested $5,000 and they invested it wisely, and next year it was $5,500, that would be in my DAF and my purview to make recommendations. There is a small administration fee, much, much smaller than a private foundation. And it depends. In my experience, community foundations tend to be some of the lowest because of their commitment to philanthropy, and they consider it kind of their mission to do that. Not always the case, though. It depends. It varies from community foundation to community foundation. So there is a small amount of that will be used to pay the DAF administrators for their investment savvy, right? But it's minute compared with what is actually growing within the DAF that the initial donor can then grant out. Yeah, Sue, follow up?
Yeah, like the community foundations frequently do their own granting.
Yep.
to community organizations. So where is that funding coming from then?
Yeah, totally separate. So often that was an endowment set up early in the community foundation. Some of these, community foundations have been around for over 100 years. And, there were Carnegies and Rockefellers and people like that who set them up. And so a lot of it's endowment. Some of it's their own fundraising. And yeah, and so they're totally separate buckets. So like I know my local community foundation, Chicago Community Trust, there's very different people on the grant side and on the DAF side. And so you want to have friends with both of them because they are doing completely separate work and working with very different donors and have their own relationships with local nonprofits.
We do have a couple of questions from Martine Campoli, if you feel like this is time to do some more.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So Martine has a couple of questions. And Martine, if you want to ask them yourself, let us know.
Yeah, do you want to unmute? And
yeah, sure. Sorry, I can jump in.
yeah,
This is
love it.
Such a great webinar. I've like known about DAFs for a while, but this is answering a lot of questions I was afraid were too dumb to ask. So thank you.
No, they're mysterious creatures, these DAFs. So let's
They
talk
really
about it.
are. Alrighty. So my first question was, what is the rate of growth? Because you mentioned that it's a benefit, allows people to make more of an impact than they might not have been able to make without using a DAF.
Yeah, so it depends on the investment strategy, and many people choose their sponsor based on, is it a more risky investment strategy? Is it a more conservative investment strategy? And so it varies from year to year, just like your stocks or other, money market accounts or other investments would vary year to year. But usually when you sign up, they say our average growth rate is X over the last 5 years or 10 years, so that people can make a decision based upon what they hope to do with it and the growth that they expect.
Do you know what like the average is?
I don't think so. It's a great question. There's a report that I have referenced later in the slides that may have it. So I would encourage you to click on that link and check it out. I want to say, it's normally in that 5 to 10% range. And again, it just depends on if they're more risky or more conservative in their investment strategy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then my other question was, if a donor recommends a grant to an organization that the DAF is like, nah, that's a red flag. The DAF can't then turn around and be like, instead, we're going to send that to this organization we chose.
No, the sponsor or administrator cannot do that, but they can come back to them and say,
the recommendation,
we cannot make it to this because it goes against our policies, right? Sometimes they do have policies too about, organizations that may have a controversial mission, more thinking like political right now, not in terms of values based. But yeah, so they will tell that the owner, right, of the DAF, we couldn't make this gift. Is there someplace else you'd like to give it? And they might think of something immediately, or they might say, oh, I need some more time then to like go back and think about it. But yes, that money will hopefully still make its way out in a timely manner, but that's part of the responsibility of the administrator, is to make sure that it's not, funding terrorism, right? That's the example I was thinking of, because frankly, it is. It's in some of and they define terrorism differently too, which is interesting. Maddie, I see your hand. What's on your mind? Oh, you're muted still, Maddie.
Thank you. I just want to be clear, even though, you put money into a donor advised fund and you can make the decisions, and that the holder of the money will, meet your, I can't think of the language I want to use, but, go along with your wishes. It is technically the foundation's money though now.
Technically, yes. And that's why a lot of people get confused, but it's very rare. In talking to all these people that I have over the last decade, it's very, very rare. Like 1 in 1,000 that they don't make the gift that was recommended by the owner of the DAF.
Yeah, no, yes, but I just want to make sure everyone understands that, that is important.
You're right, Maddie. And for that reason, and it might be in my upcoming slides, but Ethically, that means you cannot fulfill a pledge. You cannot purchase tickets or something that gives you a benefit with a DAF because you already got that tax benefit when you put it into the fund. And so there are some rules, but I work in capital campaigns all the time. I'm working on 5 or 6 of them right now. They can say, what's the word? The IRS actually came out and said they can say, oh, their intent to make a commitment from that will be fulfilled by their DAF, because they can't officially say it's my money, but they can say, I intend to fulfill my commitment through this vehicle. And so, yeah, it's not as limiting as people would think. It's actually, as long as you're really careful. The bigger thing is, when I worked at Lincoln Park Zoo here in Chicago, and people always like, I want to use my DAF to purchase gala tickets. No, you cannot do that. That is because it's intended for philanthropy, not an event that you benefit from. So that's the bigger ethical conundrum. Make sure people understand, and that's in your gift acceptance policies, that they cannot use it, to purchase their membership, to purchase event tickets, something else like that. It has to go for philanthropy. Let's go to Maureen and then Sue, and then I'm going to share some of the secret sauce, and then we'll have time for questions and more questions at the end. Maureen.
Oh. So, hi, Kristin. Thank you. This is great.
Good.
I just wanted to, so in the early days of my career, I had a couple of donors who did DAFs before DAFs were a thing, right? And back then I had, some that made the decision, but others that like kind of put it into the fund for the community foundation, and the fund picked the charities for that year. So is that still a thing?
Yeah, it's not really a DAF, but yes, they do have funds like that. So like my community foundation, I have supported, like for instance, I'm really committed to equity issues. There is a racial justice fund. I have made a gift to that, but I am trusting the community foundation to give that out. I am not making recommendations. I'm just saying, I believe in you. I want you to make sure this happens. You go do it. So you're right. That's a different type of fund. They both exist at community foundations. Sometimes they're administered by the same person and sometimes by different people. Great clarification. All right, Sue, what you got?
Okay, last one. I've been on both sides of this, to be completely honest. We have a small DAF, and I do torture different nonprofits to break down which is the tax deductible and which isn't, so that I pay out of pocket, so to speak, for that which can't be tax deducted, and then I could do the remainder through my DAF when giving a donation to an organization.
Yes, there are workarounds like that. And I wasn't going to go there, Sue, because for most people, it's a headache, right? But no, it's a great question. And I'm actually really glad you brought it up. So there are ways around it. You just have to be attuned to the gift acceptance policies of the particular organization, right? I've worked at organizations who said, that's too much work for us. We're not going to do that. You can make a philanthropic gift from your DAF. You can then purchase whatever separately through a different account. But you're right. There are times, Sue, where it totally makes sense and you can kind of partner those gifts. But it looks different with every organization. So as from a donor perspective, ask careful questions. From an organizational perspective, decide what are our gift acceptance policies? What can we do? And what is really too time consuming and not in our best interests to offer. So I'm glad they're able to offer that, but especially some small organizations, that can be a hurdle for them. All right, I'm going to answer Michelle's question because this is critical, and then we're going to jump into how do we use this information? So Michelle asked a great question. Should DAF donors not be receiving a tax letter since they already received a tax break? Yes. So I know there's some double negatives and stuff, so let me make sure it's clear. When someone gives through a DAF, their acknowledgement letter cannot mention tax benefits. And the language should say something like, thank you for recommending a gift from your DAF. We are so grateful for your partnership, blah, blah, blah. It should not have any tax language on it because technically then they could double dip, right? I made my $5,000 gift to my DAF 5 years ago. I make a $5,000 gift to my favorite organization now. I could claim that twice on my taxes, right? So technically, you're not liable, like you're not responsible for that as an organization. If they double dip, like they're the ones doing something illegal, but we don't want to like push them down the wrong path, right? We don't want our donors wearing orange. It might be the new black, but no, we do not want that. So yes, they should talk to their financial advisors. And if they have any questions, that's what I always say. But technically, right, you should have within your CRM 2 letters, right? Here's a DAF letter with no tax information. Here's the same letter for everyone else that has the tax information. So if you can do that and just have 2 versions, it'll make it easier and better for everyone.
Yes,
Right.
I've done that before, and because I think the letter is so just another wonderful touch point, like just to not say anything about the tax, you know?
Yes, exactly. And because you still want a relationship with them. So
Yep.
yeah, but yeah, and then that's the other part. Don't send it to the sponsor, right? The community
Right.
foundation, Fidelity, they don't care. They don't want to thank you. Find out who the person is and send it to them. And that's why, you know, even with Fidelity, you can call and say, I'd love their address. Are they, you know, did they give you permission to share their address so I could send them an acknowledgement? And 96% of the time, they will say, yes, I can share that with you. 4% of the time, they'll say it's anonymous. No, I can't. All righty, we're moving on. We want to maximize DAF giving. There's incredible change happening right now in the philanthropic sector. We are doing the important work on the front lines of meeting the needs of vulnerable, of, you know, filling gaps. And so DAFs are a way to do that. All of our DAFs, we should think of them as we do in all relationship fundraising. So you've probably seen this, you know, giving cycle, fundraising cycle, donor relationship cycle, whatever you want to call it. And all of these apply to DAF donors in the exact same way because y'all are smart. And some of you I saw in the chat are getting multiple DAF donations. I'd love to kind of have a waterfall in the chat. How are you currently doing some of these things with your DAF prospects? How are you identifying? How are you cultivating, right? Are there things that you are doing that are a little bit different if you know someone has a DAF? And don't worry, I'm going to share some of the things I have found to be successful in a minute. But I want to learn from you too, because there are so many good ways of doing this. So share your wisdom. How are you building relationships with DAF donors? And this is the report I mentioned. You'll see in the bottom right corner, there's the link. Also, I will just mention, because I'm not sure that the link made it in this version, there's also the National Philanthropic Trust is probably the largest DAF repository of information. They write a report every year and they're all saved on their website and totally accessible. And so that's another place if you want to look at like what is that investment or return on investment, some other stats, I would recommend those. But I think this is really important. This new report just came out this year and talked about how DAFs are actually changing some of the aspects of the donor relationship cycle. Because as you notice, there's kind of 2 entry points. And this, you know, goes back to some of the questions we've heard too, right? Sometimes you get the gift, you didn't start, you know, like we saw on the previous slide, you didn't identify, qualify, and cultivate them. You didn't even solicit them. All of a sudden you got a gift and now you need to steward it. And so there's different entry points with DAFs because sometimes you are, as you see in the top right, identifying them reactively after you get a gift. Other times you're identifying them proactively and you are then qualifying, cultivating, and stewarding, or soliciting and then stewarding, you know, as we often think of it. So I would just be really mindful that those are both valid entry points. I actually recommend that in your database, you flag all DAF donors, you know, they get a soft credit in their record. And, the DAF is where the actual gift is recorded. But those people that are soft credited, why not put a flag, DAF, right? And so you can quickly run a report. Those are the people who have already set aside cash to support good causes. If you are doing a special fundraising campaign, if there is an emergency need you are trying to meet, those are the people you go to first, because they have already made it a priority. They already have some sort of fund set aside. You don't know if it's 5,000, 50,000, or $1 million, but that they already have something set aside for this purpose. So I think that's really important to think about how to meet them where they are. And that's what this, management cycle is all about. So some specific tactics, and then we'll have a few more minutes for questions. So DAFs, they need to be everywhere. Your website needs to have a widget. Google it, DAF widget. There's a couple of different providers that offer them. They don't take a fee for it, but it helps the DAF donor look up their DAF and connect it to your work and make the gift seamlessly. So you need a DAF widget. You need in all of your appeals, to say, I'd like to make a gift through my DAF, right? And have that as an option, just like you have an option. I want to learn more about planned giving, right? Same thing. I want to make a gift through a DAF. Here, solid gold. I know this is the one thing you really want to know. There is kind of that FTO for DAFs. It is called DAF infinitive. It's actually mushed together as one word, so I think it might be definitive. It is a very affordable subscription, and you can look up DAFs just like you look up grants and grant funders. It's not comprehensive because no one is requiring it to be, but it's a wonderful thing if you wanted to look up some of your donors and see if they have DAFs, if you want to look at who in your geographic area has a DAF. They're lovely people. It's led by Helen Brown, who is a phenomenal prospect researcher. And so that's something you may consider for your organization. Participate in DAF Day. I don't know if you know this. There's a National DAF Day every year. This year it's October 9th. The whole point is, let's unlock DAFs. Let's make sure people don't forget that they have money sitting in their DAF, and let's encourage them to make a gift. If you go to that website, they have all sorts of resources. I made a big deal out of it last year with a lot of my clients, and they saw people respond, right? I know it's hard to imagine, but some people are wealthy enough that they've got many different accounts, and sometimes people just forget, oh, I haven't made a gift from my DAF in a while. So use the power of communication to remind people that they have DAFs and activate them on DAF Day. As I said, when appropriate, especially with community foundations and single issue organizations, build that relationship. Ask them if you can share a one-pager. Ask if they have any opportunities. Every once in a while, they have like meet and greet type of things where donors can actually talk to nonprofits. See if you can work with them to help create something like that. I think of it kind of like speed dating, but for philanthropy. I love it. Also talk to your DAF donors about planned giving. DAF donors are also some of the most generous with their estates. So again, if you see that they have a DAF, this is an indication that you might, be able to explore that opportunity, which jumps to the last one here. Ask them if they have a succession plan for their DAF, which is what I was talking about before, because otherwise, yes, it just goes back to the community foundation, back to Fidelity, whatever, unless they have specified what is the succession plan. It's hard sometimes to think about, but accidents happen, diagnoses sneak up on us, right? And so that can be a gift to them too. It's just to help them think about it now so that it's taken care of for their children, grandchildren, whomever. So those are some of the things that I think are most critical. A couple of other points, and you're getting this slide deck, so you'll be able to see. I just found, a couple of random examples of how organizations have a specific DAF page on their website. Again, I think it's just one of those powerful, simple things that reminds people, oh, this is a way to support our work. Just like you would hopefully mention monthly giving instead, and not just one-time gifts. You should also have a page or some references to being able to accept DAFs. I love handouts. I'm a bit of a, information junkie. They call me a squirrel because I kind of hoard tools. So this is a handout that has a bunch of resources, links, other details about DAFs. And I would love it if you share it widely, right? This isn't something you have to like hoard for yourself. Like, so if you have board members or team members who might have misconceptions about DAFs or who might be putting pressure on you, like, why aren't you researching the DAFs? And you're like, well, I actually need to subscribe then to this thing. This could be a tool you share with them. I will stay for some more questions. I loved our questions earlier, and oh, Michelle just added to that. Wonderful. I am not in a rush, and I really want to serve you today. So if you have another place to be, thank you for coming. I will also just throw up this last slide. Would love to have you connect in any other way. I send out free resources all the time. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm very active there. But yeah, reach out with follow-up questions too. And like I said, I am happy to stick around and answer any other questions. Deborah or Michelle, any kind of closing thoughts, as some people will need to leave right now.
I would love to just thank everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, Kristin, because that was such great information, I think. So helpful. And I will be sending this Kristin slides and all of this other information and this recording to everyone. So just keep that in mind. And I see that Lydia has her hand up, and I'm just going to run through the chat to see if there's any other questions as well. And Kristin, do you want to just stop sharing so we can see each other's lovely faces while we chat?
Let's see each other's faces.
Oh,
great. Well, again, so thank you. If you need to go, my feelings are not hurt. I just want to linger and be friends with all of y'all. So if you have to go, have a wonderful day. And again, thank you for being on the front lines of equity work and animal care and housing and food instability and all of the things that you are doing to make the world a better place. Lydia, would love to hear your question.
Great, thanks. I'd like to know, because I am aware that I'm a longtime grant writer, first of all. I am aware that there are a lot of DAFs that are actually on the internet, for instance, Bank of America and so forth. One, what do you think about those? Two, can you name for us some of the ones that we should be looking at to see if we're a fit and then applying? It's basically like applying for a grant application, but.
Yeah, and most DAFs, just to clarify, do not have an application. Right. Most of them, it's a family, it's a person, and it is just simply their way of giving. Instead of writing a check, they're giving through their DAF. So most of the time there's no application. Right. And so with that in mind, there's not particularly any DAFs I would recommend you look at, because it's so much, what does Kristin Raack care about? What does, Sally Smith care about? I do think DAF Infinitive is a great place if you do in fact want to research. And in my experience, like those Bank of America administered ones are actually more of a private foundation than a DAF. You'd have to check, because again, some private foundations are transitioning to DAFs because they're cheaper and easier. But most of those that I apply to, those Bank of America ones, are actually a private foundation that is administered by the financial institution. And then they do in fact have an application. So I know it's a little bit of word, play here. Sometimes you don't know if it's a DAF setup or a private foundation setup, and sometimes it doesn't really matter. But DAFs are less likely to have an application process.
Right. And I know, like, I believe JP Morgan Chase has one as well. And I was kind of wondering if is it really worth our time? Because to me, it looks like they're soliciting. They want to learn, say, your nature preserve or your food pantry. They want to learn about what food pantries are out there. But, so it is an application, which is a little weird because it's going against like what we've been talking about here. But, so your advice is to fill them out if you see them, and if you
see them. And I mean, I would ask the question, if you can, who makes the decision? Is this an actual private foundation where it's staff that's making a decision, or is it a DAF and there's an individual that's making the decision. And oh, I had a thought and I lost it. I'm
Okay,
going to
well, thank
go
you.
to Martine, and if I think of it, I'll come back to it.
Actually, can I just say one thing to Lydia before we jump
please.
to Martine? Wells Fargo has a number of these, whether they're DAFs or foundations. I don't know, but you can apply.
Yeah.
I have not had luck, and I've tried,
Yeah.
over the years, but they do have some. So just want to mention.
Great. Super. Martine.
Hi again. So this was a bit of a specific question. So we had a donor who was considering putting his family's name on a matching opportunity in our direct mail. And he was giving through a DAF. So upon a little bit of research and also a heads up from the donor, we learned that like some DAFs have different rules around like if you can use them for naming opportunities and then how you have to do the naming to acknowledge the DAF. So I wanted to know if you had any insights or, information.
Yeah. I would check the IRS website about, and you can just search DAF in their search terms. I want to say it was 2017 is when they released a lot of rules, and that's where they clarified that yes, you can make a pledge payment out of a DAF, but the words have to be that you're recommending it, or you are making a commitment where you intend to use your DAF. And I think there's some language there too about naming opportunities. A lot of the naming opportunities, frankly, come down to your organization's gift acceptance policy and how you choose to acknowledge. I err on the side of inclusion, and especially in campaigns, I've worked on even some of the lead donors have made gifts through DAFs and have still gotten the naming recognition. And we let them choose because most of them don't want to say like, yeah, the Smith Family Donor Advised Fund, because that's not as personal as like, Jim and Sally Smith. So there's kind of twofold. So check IRS first, but then set up your own gift acceptance policy and recognition policies so that you administer that consistently.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Other questions?
Laura Sanzel has a lot of interesting questions. Laura, do you just want to unmute yourself, or do you want me to read them here?
No, that's okay. I don't, thanks for saying it's interesting. I was just looking at the GoFundMe DAF.
Yeah.
Have you any experience with it?
So for those of you that don't know, and I hope I'm getting the names right. So it was Classy. Classy merged with GoFundMe, and now it's GoFundMe Pro. Is that right? Okay.
I don't know about Pro.
I think that's part of the name, because they're probably different parts, right? They still have the regular GoFundMe, but now they're doing more with nonprofits and like being a fundraising tool, because historically GoFundMe was just me setting up something, right? I have cancer,
right?
Like, help provide for my care, and now they're really moving into the nonprofit space, saying we have a tool that has worked for I don't know a decade or more. Let's use it. And I know I did get an email about it because I'm on their listserv about their DAFs. I do not know much about it, but it's something that they're just launching because, again, DAFs are a hot topic these days. And so I don't know the details. My guess is they're going to be something like a community foundation in how they would administer it, but I have not gone down the rabbit hole, so I don't want to misspeak about any of it.
Okay.
And then, Mary, I know earlier you were asking if most community foundations have a specific DAF representative or someone representing DAFs.
A staff member.
Kristin. Yeah, staff member.
Super question. So I can give you, some examples. So like Chicago Community Trust, yes, they have one person. That's all he does. DAFs all day, every day, all the time. I have a local community foundation that's much smaller, right? Where Chicago Community Trust, I don't know, they have 100 people that work there, something like that. It's huge. It's one of the biggest community foundations in the country. My little Oak Park River Forest Community Foundation is tiny. I think they have like 5 total staff. And so it's a portion of one person's job. and she actually does all what they call programming. And so she distributes the funds that are like the community foundation funds. She also distributes the DAF funds. She also does, like a young philanthropist program. She does a lot of things. So a lot depends on their size. If they're large, they probably have one dedicated person. If they're smaller, it might be a portion of several people's jobs. Any other questions? Just unmute, and I'm scanning chat too to make sure we've covered everything.
I think you covered it.
Great. Well, you guys all have my contact information from the slide deck. So if anything else comes up, honestly, this is one of my favorite topics, and my kids are tired of hearing about DAFs, frankly. So if you have questions, hit me. Like, I would love to talk about it because my kids just roll their eyes and think I'm a little batty. So it has been a privilege to meet with you guys today and to help equip you to keep bringing in great support for the nonprofits that you are affiliated with. So thank you again for all of the hard work you do. I know it's even harder in 2025 than it was in 2024. So just, stay in community and let me know if there's any other way that I can help you in the work that you are doing.
Well, thank you, Kristin. I'm speaking, I think, for everyone when I say, we really appreciate your expertise and all this information, and we're just thrilled that you could join us.
Yeah.
And just a reminder that I'd love to see everyone else at those fall programs. And Kristin, anytime you want to join us for any of our programming, you're always invited.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Come and say hello. And it was great seeing everyone. So thank you all for being here. And I will be sending out the email with the recordings and slides and that survey. Please do fill that out.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great talk.